That's all he does. Charters and so runs out and camps them. Tough life.
Mm-hmm.
I must have Walton. If he could stir the pot, it'd be him.
Come on, it's close enough. Damn him.
Big strand of prunes.
And he realized really fast he
Me too.
stepped off him and he got one teaching his hands.
Please rise. Commissioner Commander.
Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this opportunity to come together and serve the people of Walton County. We ask that the decisions we make tonight will be in the best interest of the people we serve, as well as this wonderful county that you have entrusted to our care. We also lift up to you tonight a former county attorney who served this county for 23 years. We ask that you shine your blessing on George Ralph Miller and on his family as they grieve in this time of loss. For all these things we ask in thy name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it serves, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Call this meeting to order. Thank you. We're here to have a public hearing on the comp plan and land development code ordinances that pertain to the coastal dune lakes. We'll be meeting here until 7 o'clock, and if necessary, if we're not done by 7, we'll continue this to the next board meeting. But I've noted the one thing in the month of May, we keep recognizing people with birthdays, and last time it was Commissioner Chapman, and tonight we have somebody that's exceeded the double nickel, Mr. Larry Jones. So happy birthday, Larry.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Dice, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you mentioned a minute ago, this is a two-part proposal. One is to amend the comprehensive plan in relation to the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone, and the other is to also amend the land development code for the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone. The primary changes are, as it currently stands in both the comp plan and the land development code, there's a 25% limitation on vegetative clearing. In that 25%, it includes any kind of clearing, driveways, home for construction of homes, etc. The proposal is to move that percentage to 50% and remove that language from the comp plan and keep it in the land development code. Primarily, that reason is to account for any need for a variance that may arise. As you may know, when there's language in the comp plan, there is no relief that can be obtained through any kind of variance proceedings. We have encountered over the past year or so several occasions, actually numerous occasions, where due to lot configuration and size, etc., it makes the 25% makes the building a single-family home somewhat difficult, and in some cases nearly impossible. And so we're trying to provide an avenue of flexibility to where we can account for those. Also, in the vein of the variance process, we also have included some provisions relating to a supermajority to pass a variance to give relief to the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone regulations. In the comp plan, the 100-foot buffer is staying. We've proposed to keep that in the comp plan. The coastal shore armoring, all those things are still staying in the comp plan. But the primary difference is the 25% moving it to 50%. Mr. Chairman, with that, I'm going to ask Brian Underwood to come up and just kind of go through the ordinance with you briefly, and then have Matt Carpenter follow up and go over it. There's been many questions about the size of the lots on different lakes, and Matt will be going over a table that we prepared to show those lot sizes, et cetera. But first, I'll ask Brian Underwood to come up and go over the ordinance with you, the language of the ordinance.
Thank you. Brian Underwood, Planning and Development Services. I wanted to just follow up and initially say that there are some proposed additions that are not really regulatory in and of themselves, but the language was added to kind of clarify some areas where the language in the Land Development Code was a tiny bit week, so we've strengthened that. It really doesn't change the regulatory intent. Also, there are some other additions in there that are not terribly substantive, but the existing language is in the comprehensive plan, so we basically pasted it into the proposed land development code language. Didn't invent anything new, we're just copying it in from the comp plan. So I wanted to make that clear. Currently, the 25% clearing limit language only applies to the square footage of any given lot that is outside of the initial 100-foot protection zone. The intent of the proposed revisions is that the 50% calculation would apply to the gross square footage of any particular lot, so the gross square footage of the entire lot, including that acreage or square footage that's within that initial 100-foot zone. The intent is to provide just flexibility for some of the smaller lots that the development potential may be perceived as constrained. And so the flexibility is given through the limited relaxation of the vegetative clearing limits. And so as Wayne mentioned, the proposed increase is from 25% to 50% for the clearing limits. And also we've added language to allow subdivision plats which have existing setbacks, building envelopes, and other graphical information which clearly define specific development standards to supersede any of the current and proposed standards through this amendment. So because a plat is a legally binding document, so there may be descriptions on those plats that would, have merit. We've also added language in the proposal to address legal nonconformities for structures in cleared areas that exceed current standards within the coastal dune lake protection zone. The proposal provides relief from legal nonconformity issues by allowing a structure that is destroyed to be rebuilt on the same footprint as the original structure. For the comprehensive plan amendment currently proposed, the desire is to totally remove the 25% clearing limit provision. And by removing that from the comprehensive plan, it would allow property owners to seek any relief through zoning board of adjustment if they feel there's a hardship on their property. And that would be through petition for variance applied through zoning board of adjustment. We have received some correspondence that's included in your packet from Susan Palladini, Jackie Markell, Carl Valentino, Bondi McQuiston, and Richard Armstrong. The Planning Commission met on April 9th, 2015, and recommended approval of this language that's currently proposed, subject to the addition of the term semi-pervious on page 6, line 36 of the Land Development Code language. We've got some PowerPoint slides of the various strike-through and underline language. We can go through that page by page if you would like.
Brian, I just have a couple clarification questions. Could I go ahead and ask them now? Could you give a definition of the footprint? Because does that mean that if someone's house is 50% or more destroyed, and does the footprint mean like the building pad area, or does it mean the exact footprint that they're in? So in other words, let's say that somebody's real close to a coastal dune lake right now, and let's say their house is damaged and destroyed and they want to rebuild, but they want to build it further away from the shoreline, up a bit, but they don't want to exceed the footprint, but they want to build it in a different location. So what does that mean?
And Commissioner, that's a great question. I think as it's written, it means a footprint of where it is. I will tell you that if they want to build further away, we would probably encourage that. if that's something that we want to clarify, we may want to do it, just maybe add just a brief statement about that no closer to the lake or some language like that. Because absolutely we want to, if they want to build further away, we want to highly encourage that as much as we can.
Yeah. Well, maybe we could add a definition of footprint, or further explain it where it says that, it's the footprint, but by all means, if you want to relocate that footprint north of there,
Right,
or
to-
whichever direction
To
it is.
a more conforming location than.
Yeah, or to just away from the lake,
Right.
then, you'd
Okay.
be able to do that.
Sure, thank you.
And then the second question I had was, what was the semi-pervious? Why did they add that on there? Or why did they suggest that we add that on there?
That was Commissioner Kramer made that recommendation, and I think it was to encourage the use of semi-pervious material for driveways and parking areas, pervious pavers, or certain aggregates that would be semi-pervious
Okay.
to help with the stormwater.
Okay, so the way that it reads, I'm trying to find it here now.
On page 6.
Number 6. So, exception to variances would be if you have a lot that's so constrained that you can't meet any of these, then you are able to build a 1,500 square foot impervious and semi-impervious area. See, I don't understand that. It says such constrained lots may be developed with a total impervious and semi-impervious area of 15, but it doesn't give any kind of split. Like, how much do you want to be in? I would say just leave it as maybe developed with a total impervious of 1,500 square feet. I mean,
Okay.
that would be 1,500 square feet impervious surfaces. So that if they wanted to go up, they could.
What was the reasoning again, Brian, between, adding the semi?
I believe it was to just ensure that paved driveways were discouraged.
Right.
And if
Good,
you
yeah.
provided a semi-pervious driveway or parking area, it would be more desirable,
Right.
if I
But
recall
would
right.
the semi-impervious area not be counted toward that 1,500 square feet? That wasn't very clear.
We can strengthen that language if you would direct us to do that to make it clearer.
It needs to be. And also on that same page, Commissioner, up on B,
Yeah.
you're right, it does say may be rebuilt within the footprint of the original foundation after
Yeah.
being destroyed. So that language needs to be changed so that if they want to move it further, not moving it any closer for heavens, but if they want to move it further back on the lot, that needs to be encouraged.
We will make
Somehow,
that change.
I don't know how you word it, but Cindy, you probably do.
Well, you just say, maybe rebuilt within the footprint after being destroyed by the fire, or may rebuild
Further landward?
further landward. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, further landward. Yeah. And then also, too, on that line, it says legal nonconformity. I think we should just say any structure, because a structure it could be a multifamily structure, it could be a commercial structure, or it could be any other structure. And I think we should say any structure which existed as a legal nonconformity.
Sure.
Can there be any commercial in the coastal Denmark?
Pardon?
Can there be any commercial?
There is.
Isn't one-
There is now. There's.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to talk about pervious and impervious or semi-pervious, or, you could say in addition to the 1,500 square feet, you could have an impervious. You could have a pervious driveway or a pervious. You could have other things that were pervious, but
Yeah.
that would be one way of addressing that. But
Okay.
that's
Right.
my comments.
We'll continue.
Yes, sir.
Go
That's really all.
Okay, I also have a question on page 14, if you, septic tanks. I think one of the biggest problems or future problems with our coastal dune lakes is septic tanks. And I'm told that if you test the water, there's not so much human waste in the lakes as there is animal, but still, I am very concerned about septic tanks. And on page 14, you talk about septic tanks. Septic tank drain fields must be located at least 75 feet from the ordinary or mean high water line, whichever applies. Does it say anywhere in any of our code that if there is sewer available that you have to hook up to sewer? Because I think that should be part of, you should have to hook up to sewer if it's available. And I talked to Melissa Pilcher last week, who is with Regional Utilities. And a number of years ago, and I don't know how long ago it was, but they offered people all over South Walton who wanted to hook up to their sewer system very low. I think gave them over 20 years. You could pay like $20 a month and you could hook up to sewer.
Right.
I talked to her, and they are willing to offer that again to people to get them off septic tanks. And it has been, I won't say the word because I'm not going to jinx anything, but it's been a long time. But one of the things that happened 10 years ago was septic tanks being exposed on the bluffs and as well as the coastal dune lakes because of some tropical activity that we had. And I think we really need to have a push to get people off of septic tanks. And I think that will be one of the major things that will help with our coastal dune lakes and the coast as well. We need people. So I think we need some language that says if it's available, especially if you're a new build, then you should hook up to septic.
You may be able to, but I think the state legislature a while back pulled that and said, you can't make people hook up. I know, and we went round and round, but you can't make people hook up. They even had a thing that said if they fail, they have to hook up. But I think that went away even. Somebody could probably tell me.
I don't think so.
I'll try.
Yeah.
Okay.
The language on page 14 that references the 75 feet, that is language that applies to the Bay Shoreline Protection Zone. If you look at page 13, letter B, it says within the Bay Shoreline Protection Zone. So the 75 feet there applies to the Bay Shoreline Protection Zone. Actually, on the following page, within the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone, which is at the top of page 15, septic tank drain fields must be located at least 100 feet away from the main ordinary high water line. That is greater than what the health department, who regulates septic systems, require. They would require only a 75-foot setback, so we've increased that to 100. As far as sewer availability, if sewer is available, they have to connect to sewer before the health department will give them a septic permit. So if someone was to make a repair application or a new application to build a home, one of the first requirements of that application is the applicant or the builder would have to get a letter from the utility provider stating whether sewer is available or not. If it is not available, then they would have the option to utilize a septic system. If it is available, they have to connect to that utility.
Good. And I think so now, being I've spoken to Melissa, those that are perhaps still on septic, that are there now. I mean, this gives them a golden opportunity to hook up at very little, and cost. And
Oh, I'm sorry. Scott Caraway, Walton County Public Works.
So are they going to announce that, Sarah? How are they going to?
well, I mean, she told me I'll get them to maybe, because one thing about a septic tank, when the electricity goes out, you can't flush either.
True.
So.
Commissioners, any other questions? Okay, Wayne just said that Mac was going to speak.
Yeah, step out for a minute. I think he's got a sick family member at home. He's having to deal with it too. We also, in the last slide, we just wanted to provide you, the board, a copy of the We have had a lot of questions about the lake, the parcels around the lake and small lots. I think the Land Development Code classifies a small lot as 1/8 of an acre, roughly about 5,000 square foot lots. And we just want to show that and show you the number of small lots that we have around the lakes. There's some that doesn't have many at all. There's other ones that have quite a few. And I think the small lots are where, some of the problems are coming from as well. So we want to point that out to you, just so you can have that information.
Wayne, is this in our packet? Because I've got something that was shown to the Planning Commission.
Yes, ma'am. This is a replica of the one that was given to the Planning Commission.
Okay, this one just has totals at the bottom.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask you something. Is this vacant lots, or how many of these are built on? Do you have any, do we know that?
I don't, Commissioner. I don't know that answer.
Okay.
Do you know, Matt?
I think, yeah.
See that one?
Anything else you want to add, Matt?
One of the things, Matt Carpenter for the Planning Department, one of the things we're also looking at is, obviously a number of these lots have been developed, but they're going to be redeveloped. Right. And there are a lot of lots out there that have not yet been developed that people are getting ready to. We had a period of 3 years after we adopted the EAR amendments, March 1, 2011, where virtually nothing happened in the county. And then all of a sudden, everybody decided that now's the time to start building on these lots we've been holding on to for a long time. So we're getting tremendous development pressure on these unimproved coastal dune lake lots now.
Okay. And then when y'all said David Bailey made the motion to approve, did y'all mean David Kramer in the Planning Commission thing?
We noticed it, or I believe that was just a.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Commissioners, are we ready for public comment? Okay, we're going to use the sign-up sheet for public comments in the order that they're listed. So I'd like to invite to the microphone first Debbie Hurd. Please state your last name correctly for the record and spell it so that the clerk can adequately or accurately record it.
Mr. Chairman, how many
Jesse
have we
Hurd.
got? Excuse me, ma'am.
I've got close to 30 names that are listed.
30
Well,
times five is
we'll never at 5 minutes be able to get everybody in by 7 o'clock. So I'm going to make a motion. We reduce it to 3 minutes so we afford everybody the opportunity to have some statement made.
Is that your motion?
That's my motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion carries. Okay, 3 minutes is the time limit for each person to speak. You're on.
Debbie Hurd,
And you might want to bring that microphone thing down. There you go.
Debbie Hurd, Heard. I'm the Vice Chairman of the Coastal Dune Lake Advisory Board, and I'm here speaking on their behalf tonight. We sent 3 letters to the commissioners. The first letter was February 26th, and I'd like to read that letter to you. Dear Commissioners, the Coastal Dune Lakes Advisory Board believes that Section 4.02.04b of the Land Development Code protecting the coastal dune lakes, draft dated January 5th, address an issue distinct from the rest of the ordinance. The CD Lab recommends that the Board of County Commissioners address that section on legal nonconformity immediately and separately from the rest of the ordinance because of its urgency and negative impacts it has on existing homeowners. For any changes made to the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Ordinance other than that section, the CD Lab requests that the county hold at least 2 workshops for public review and comment on any suggested changes. We also request that the following data be made available to the public and county commissioners for review prior to the workshops. A large detailed map of coastal dune lakes with lot lines defining lots within the 300-foot Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone. The number of lots within the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone in total and by lake. A number of lots recorded within the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone in total by lake. And the number of lots that are less than 1/8 of an acre within the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone. And we thank you for your consideration and recommendations. And it was signed by our Chairman, Richard Armstrong. Our second letter, dated the same date. Dear Commissioners, the Coastal Dune Lake Advisory Board has reviewed a study entitled Coastal Dune Lakes of Northwest Florida, Lakes, Estuaries, and Unique Aquatic Systems, conducted by Catherine Gross. We believe the study provides important information that you, as a member of the Board of Commissioners, should consider before voting on changes to the Coastal Dune Lake Protection Zone ordinance. We also propose that Ms. Gross do a follow-up study of the coastal dune lakes. The study would assess each coastal dune lake and its watershed to quantify current nutrient load expected to result in serious degradation of water quality, predicted nutrient loads based on various development scenarios. All of the data required to complete the study are available from existing databases, including Choctawhatchee Bay Alliance water quality data and GIS parcel data. The study would assess each of the coastal dune lakes separately, using those within the state parks as reference points on the low end of the scale, because they have minimally impacted watersheds, and Oyster Lake as reference point at the high end of the scale, because we know that it's already impaired. The proposed study would use the data described above to build models of the current nutrient loads for each lake, as well as models of nutrient loads using different scenarios. So, for example, nutrient levels for any coastal dune lake could be compared using a model assuming the current allowable level.
Okay. Ms. Hurd, finish up real quick.
Okay, it goes on to explain that.
And we've received those letters. We have those.
Okay, we've had no response to those letters. We sent another letter
Thank you.
asking for a response.
Okay, your time is up, please. Cynthia Alexander.
I have 7 copies of my comments written. Who should I give those
State your
to?
last name, spell it for the clerk, please.
Cynthia Alexander, Alexander. I'm a resident of Walton County, and I've lived in my home on a coastal dune lake for 28 years. This is my first home that I've owned, and it is my only home. My lot was platted in 1980. My home was built in 1983, and I purchased it in 1987. My property fits both the description of a lot of record and also of a small lot. Therefore, it is exempt from the 1996 Comprehensive Plan restrictions. However, when the Planning Department reinterpreted the plan 18 years after its implementation, and the Commission passed their flawed ordinance last May, the new interpretation omitted the exemptions for lots of record and small lots. The present ordinance causes me 100% loss of my property rights in the event my home is destroyed. After more than a year and nearly 20 draft revisions, the restoration of the rightful legal exemptions to property owners established prior to the implementation of the comprehensive plan still falls short in the revision before you. Personally, I believe you should rescind the ordinance and abandon this punitive reinterpretation after allowing South Walton to build out and mature as a community. If you are determined to proceed, I urge you to fix the deficient language with the utmost expediency. The needed language is the exemption granted to previously existing lots under Section 4.02.04. The language was present up until at least Draft 12, dated December 2014, but it is now again omitted. Legal nonconformity has been restated, but limits rebuilding to the footprint of the original foundation. However, some homes, such as my own, have footprints less than 50%. Without the restoration of the previously existing lots exemption, the result is an inequitable application of the law among affected property owners. Previously existing lots face an even heavier confiscation of property rights than other lake properties. I urge you to restore the right of residential lots, platted or existing before January 5th, 1993, to have the right to build back in their own footprint and up to an amount equal to 50%. Regardless, it's obvious that enforcing the new ordinance will have no impact on the coastal dune lakes. If the county is sincere about protecting the lakes, I respectfully recommend we implement stormwater management and replace the 30A roadbed dams with bridges. Stormwater capture throughout South Walton will solve the runoff problem into the lakes. Limiting the size of homes in a 300-foot zone around the lakes and their tributaries will not. We should be living in peace and economic security and stability, spending our time and money on effective conservation and not by pleading with government to correct course on bad decisions with epic, although unintended, consequences. Thank you for the opportunity to address you and for your careful and wise consideration of the decisions before you.
Thank you. Carl Valentino.
I do have some questions on that, but I'll hold them until I have a question with the attorney, but I'll hold them until.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Valentino.
Carl Valentino, Valentino. When I walked into this room, I saw a picture on the screen of pine trees, palmettos, and beautiful natural growth occurring. On that property, it's safe to say there's no septic tanks, there's no fertilizer, and there's no pesticides. Needless to say, if that property is near a lake, a coastal dune lake, there's no pollution emitting from that property into that lake. I believe that your ultimate purpose is to preserve our coastal dune lakes, prevent them from being polluted. You can take that example of the photograph where there was no pollution present and extend that somehow, similar to the way Ms. Commander pointed out about septic systems and the inclusion of some words to help people to limit their installations or install septic systems where, we'll say, regional utilities is not available. That's very good. And I would suggest that a ban on the use of fertilizers on lots that are adjacent to coastal lakes would be an effective way to prevent chemicals from getting into our lakes. So therefore, it's my opinion that the size of a house or any building on a lot has nothing to do with the amount of chemicals that may get into the lake or any lakes. So putting restrictions on the size of buildings to be rebuilt or to initially be built has nothing to do with the amount of pollution abatement that you're trying to accomplish. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Cindy Bowers?
Hello, Cindy Bowers, B-O-W-E-R-S. I'm Cindy Bowers. I just drove in from Atlanta today. This situation is very brand new to me. I've just been notified on Thursday when we were supposed to close on construction to start building currently in the next couple of weeks of the entire situation. So today is actually a very learning experience. Some of the things that have already been mentioned really helps me understand. A couple of points that I wrote down not answered is, the fact that we can't even have a variance hearing. Our specific lot is quite large. We're one of the last builds on the street. One just was CO. That's like a mini mansion. We've met with 4 builders, planning, paid our sewer and tap fees, gone through the whole process, and just Thursday afternoon informed of this situation. We don't even know or did know or never notified that we were on a tributary. I don't know how we are notified or if it should be on a survey or something to give us notice so we could do proper planning and understand. The other thing, I know a couple of people mentioned, some of the economic situations. I am a real estate agent in Atlanta. My husband is in development and construction. And right now, time is of the essence for this development and interest rates, construction, lumber's getting ready to go up again. And we just can't really sit here and not have the opportunity to go ahead and move forward on some of this building. We don't even have plans to build a very large house, just a very simple house on a lot that we bought in 2006 at a high price back in those days at the top of the market, struggled through the recession, and here just getting ready to start living life and making Seagrove our home. We're right off of 395, and again, we had no idea or we would have addressed this head on. Met with 4 builders in the immediate area, one that just built on the street, on the tributary, and no mention of this. Not that that's his fault, and it's not our fault. We would have certainly done our due diligence had we known that this process was going to start, and now we're going to be very much impacted going forward and what we can do with this lot that we paid well over $300,000 for, and now we're going to be impacted to only be able to build on 25% when we do have a very large lot, and not even sure what's back there as far as if it's a tributary, if it's a water, what kind of situation that we're on. So, and then being told on Thursday that there's not even an opportunity for a variance hearing. So just getting some questions answered, and I appreciate your time and focus on this issue and hopefully you'll be able to come up with some good ideas today to kind of move us forward quickly. Time is of the essence for a lot of folks looking to build.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Larry Davis?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Larry Davis, DAVIS. I am a local real estate broker. In 1991, my brother Robert purchased 3 lots from back on Canal Street from Cube McGee's Seagrove 4th Edition. That was platted in 1959, and according to Brian, would be a legally binding document, that plat that was recorded. In 91, he bought those. In 2002, he talked to me about selling those lots, and my main concern was the amount of wetlands that were on the lot. So we had the wetland work done. We identified the federal jurisdiction through the Army Corps of Engineers, the state through the Florida DEP, and got those permits after about 2 years and a lot of money. We realized that those permits were expiring prior to 2010, and in 2010 we made those improvements. Working with Wayne and his crew at the planning department, I have my own circumstances resolved with the planning department and are ready to move forward. In the meantime, on my brother's lot, he went ahead and impacted the wetland area to be able to put the driveway through to the upland area that was identified that was outside of the jurisdiction of the federal and the state government to reach this buildable area. Conservation easements were placed on all of the surrounding property that cannot be moved. So we've met federal and state guidelines. Meeting with Wayne in the planning department, because of the 100-foot no touch, no setback, we are left with a very small buildable area that essentially is a take and removing any value of this lot, making it practically unbuildable to be able to build on. I'm here today to implore you to remove the 100-foot buffer from the comprehensive plan and put it into the land development code that would allow a variance. We shouldn't have to come back here all these years later to request a variance, but we need to be able to have this lot that would be buildable. I would also implore you to consider just revoking the whole ordinance all the way around. There are too many loose ends. It's not one solution that fits all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Brian Dumas?
Brian Dumas, D-U-M-A-S. Thank you for your time. I have a lot under contract right beside the lot that Larry has, and it's the same situation. The person has conservation easements completely around the building pad, so I can't really move it. One thing I'd like to see if could be added. The lot is 200 feet in length, but it's on a tributary that one day it's 199, the other day it's 200, the other day it's 201. So, I mean, the water flows into it, so there's some movement there. If it would be possible, I'd like to see a margin of error added to the 200-foot limit for setbacks. And I'd also... I own 70 acres in the north part of the county, and it's totally in just pristine condition. And, you know, it's conservation land in my mind, but I bought it with my own money. I think, you know, conservation, I'm all for it. I mean, I drove my Prius here with my family, but we paid for that land with our money. You know, when you impose conditions on people that already own something, you know, I kind of have a problem with that. I'm as environmentally conscious as anybody I know, but I think you should kind of pay your own environmental way and not expect other people to impose things on you. But I understand government and politics is about compromise. So I would hope that you could come with a good compromise situation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily Ellis?
Emily Ellis, E-L-L-I-S. I live on Lake Powell and have for 21 years now. I've spent 19 years volunteering with the University of Florida Lake Watch program. I conduct monthly water quality sampling of 12 stations in Lake Powell. 10 years ago, our data showed very high spikes in nitrogen and phosphorus at select stations. No cause was found, yet it was assumed to be related to the newly developed golf course on the north side. Afterward, the golf course community began doing in-house water quality testing, and they addressed 2 eroding shorelines. Now, all of their waterfront is in conservation easements. This occurrence, 10 years ago, brought the lake community together, and the Lake Powell Community Alliance, a not-for-profit, was founded. As you know, Lake Powell is situated in Bay and Walton counties. This can create confusion for some folks when it comes to management. Setbacks are different in Bay County than in Walton County, and in some cases different from the north side to the south side. And I would like to submit a photo, if I may. I wish everyone could see it, and I apologize for the size, but basically it's a picture of 2 adjacent shorelines in Bay County. One is new development and one is redevelopment. You'll see seawalls, which were permitted, grass to the water's edge, and mounds of illegal fill on a 30-foot buffer. Code enforcement was called, nothing was done. During the boom, the Bay County Planning Commission approved a 33-story high-rise for the southeast shoreline. The developers hit a roadblock when they realized they had no legal beach access. Later, another group proposed a plan for a 26-story tower for the same property. I was astounded and proud as I sat in that commission meeting and watched them vote 4-1 to reject that plan, after approving every other high-rise plan that came before them. Most of the private south shorelines of Lake Powell are developed, and most are lots of record. The prospect of what could happen with redevelopment truly scares me. I have one neighbor that bought a lot with 300-plus feet of shoreline. No house, but he has put in a dock. The lot depth is 360-plus feet. Although they did leave the larger trees, they continue to mow the whole lot, the 100-foot buffer, and all the way to the sawgrass. Jackie Markell's letter inspired me. She says, "How we assess value is subjective. In the long run, degrading the coastal dune lakes will devalue properties. For years, I've bragged on the foresight of Walton County. Please make the right decision today. Thank you."
Thank you. Richard, looks like Brian?
Richard Bryan, B-R-Y-A-N. I am a little bit disturbed about the vagueness of some of the language that has been proposed. I sort of got the idea that instead of us trying to solve a problem for those that had hardships, we might be just opening the barn door and saying, yeah, come on in, everybody. And the more I thought about it, the more I said, well, you know, we really need a better definition of what a hardship is. Maybe a list of what hardships are. Take a little weight off of code enforcement and off of planning in terms of trying to determine that. Might prevent some lawsuits, very possibly. So I focused on that. I said if people knew exactly what was being proposed and what the changes would be, I think you'd see a lot less differences between environmental and development. Another thing I want to point out is there are some people that all it is money. That's all it is. They want to get the most money out of it. And I guess I understand that. I live on a coastal dune lake. I've got almost an acre that is on Lake Powell. And I look around me and think to myself, well, you could do that or you could do that. But then I stop and think about what's down there And the fact that as a steward of that land, that I probably would not want to do certain things. And I wouldn't mind at all, and didn't mind at all, when, you know, the county came and said, you need to be this far away, and you can't put your septic tank on the south side of the house because you're not that far away from the 500-foot flood area, or 500-year flood area. And I realized, yeah, they're right. You know, so I had to make a few changes, and couldn't exactly do what we had planned to do, but you know, as it turned out, I'm real happy with what I did. I have a fairly clear conscience. Again, what I'd like to say is, let's define this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bonnie McQuiston.
Bonnie McQuiston, McQuiston. I will echo something that Larry Davis said. There are so many loose ends. I thought that this was pretty tight when you all were going. I thought we were going for 50% of the gross area of a property, but there are too many. For instance, I've had my property for 30 years. I've paid taxes for 30 years on my property, and I've had full use and enjoyment of that. What happens if I burn down or the house gets blown away by a hurricane? Is that when the 100-foot buffer kicks in? See, I don't know. Most of our lots around our coastal dune lakes are developed, I'm willing to guess. I don't know for sure, but I think a lot of them are. When does that 100-foot buffer kick in? Does that then mean that we lose our yard that we've been using? There's the other thing that's confusing is that I've heard the years 1992, 1993 used as when the rules went into effect, or if you had a lot of record before that, it was a different category. And I was here. I was part of. I attended the trust meetings for 4 years. The comp plan was adopted in 1996. Now, the 1992-93, whatever that was sent to state was not accepted. It was rejected. So I don't think that was law. I think that you'd have to use 1996 if you're going to have a category that's prior to, these rules should not go into effect until that plan was officially adopted and accepted. And the other problem is the category. So you have a category for the people before 1996, for people after that, for people with small lots. Now, very quickly, because I don't want to run out of time. My neighbor is a perfect example. He says he bought his house a year ago. He wants to renovate. He wants to move it back from where it is now. This did not allow him to do that. Thank you, Commissioner Meadows. He wants to do that, but he doesn't have but 35 feet behind his house now. He doesn't have 100 feet. If he goes 100 feet, he's left with 40 feet to build, and that's before the 20-foot setback from the front, and he can't do it. And to have to go to variance, and I don't know where the 1,500 square feet number comes in. Is that magic? Why 1,500? The exception to various limits to 1,500 square feet of impervious, or is it why? Where did that 1,500 come from? So there's so much that we haven't had to explain. There are contradictions. There are too many categories. I don't know when the 100-foot, as I said, kicks in for people who've been living there. Why do we have to go to a variance? Why does he have to fly in from Ohio, hire a lawyer, and go to variance to build on his property more than 1,500 square feet when there's 2,500 there now? And who are those people? And it's a rotating committee, I think. So I just think there's a lot that has to be cleared up here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Along that line, can I ask Wayne or Matt a quick question? She brought up a good point there. If you, my understanding is, if your house is burnt or there is a storm, you can build it back in the footprint, and that means the location that it's in now, correct?
Well, she brings a good point about the 100-foot buffer, because that's in the comp plan. The non-conforming replacement is actually in the land development code. Okay. In that case, just off the top of my head, I think that we would have to apply the comp plan language to that. So that may be a conflict right there that we might want to address, because the non-conforming replacing footprint is only in the land development code. That language is only there. And so it could not trump the comp plan language of the 100-foot buffer. Now, in some cases, for lots that are less than 200 feet in length, and you have the shadow lot of record provisions, which can reduce those setbacks from 100 foot down to a lower number, not any lower than 25 feet. But that is a conflict.
Okay. What if somebody wants to expand their house versus rebuild after a storm or something? Let's say wants to add on to their house. They're now located 35 feet from the water, and they want to build on a room or a deck or something else.
With the non-conforming language we have, we would let you expand as long as you're not expanding further into that non-conformity. So just say the front of the house is in the setback, the back of the house is not further into the setback. We will let you expand the back of the house, but you can't further expand into the non-conforming areas. That makes sense. That's a little bit technical, but
you can't further make it further non-conforming.
You can't make it further non-conforming. You can't expand any further.
Okay, so you could expand, but the 100 feet. If you have a house now that's been sitting there and it's 50% destroyed, and we're telling them they can rebuild on the same footprint, then that's
the 100 foot would need to be addressed. And if that's a concern, probably the wisest thing to do would be to move that language also to the land development code. Now, the variance has come up many times tonight. The variance, it's not a given. It's not just an automatic. You appear before the zoning board of adjustments. There's strict criteria that they apply, and in my time here, that they've been very strict in applying that.
And the way it's written now, is it a supermajority?
Yes, ma'am. You got to have 5 concurring votes to get the variance.
How many people are on that board? 7. Okay. What if 4 show up?
You got to have 5 concurring votes, and I'll defer to Mark on that. But I believe if you have 5 concurring votes,
why didn't we say a supermajority instead of 5 votes?
It's just semantics. We could change it.
I don't know if there was any particular reason to make sure it was just the language we chose.
Because one of the members could be out sick for 3 months, and then you wouldn't have 5 people there. Which
supermajority of those present, so long as we have a quorum.
Right.
Yeah, that would be fine.
I'm just trying to look at all the issues that we have on some of these boards where we don't have a quorum. Anyway, that's just my question. I think the 100 feet that's definitely a question that needs to be addressed.
Right.
On the rebuilds.
Right. And I think the solution to that would be is, again, to move that 100 feet to the land development code. If that's what the board so chooses, then that would make that eligible again for the variance.
Joe Mustachio.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Joe Mustachio. That's Mustachio. Like many others, I also live on a coastal dune lake. I live on Eastern Lake, and I've been there for 15 years. I also happen to be president of my homeowners association, and it's interesting to me to note how many of the lakes have established their own neighborhood associations. We have one on Eastern Lake referred to as ELNA, which is the Eastern Lake Neighborhood Association, and quite frankly, we try to be good stewards of the lakes, of Eastern Lake specifically, because that's what we live on and look at it and enjoy it every day. Like many of the residents here who have homes that are affected within the coastal dune lake protection zone, I think the overriding message that you're hearing is that we're looking for balance. We're looking for something that makes sense that we can all live with, protect the lakes, and also protect our properties in the event of a catastrophic event. We all understand what that can mean. I've lived through 2 of them in my lifetime, and I'll tell you, worse than losing your home, which is bad enough, is the ability not to rebuild your home in the footprint that you've become used to living in and replace what has been lost. One of the things that I was interested in is the terminology that was used, and I didn't hear it here tonight, and quite frankly I expected to, about the lakes being critically impaired. And I spent a fair amount of time on the internet searching through documents that were from Tallahassee. And sidebar note, there's been a lot of studies that have been done by the state about trying to determine where this language came from. And there's a document that's known as the FENIME, which is prepared by the Florida Natural Areas Inventory and the Florida Department of Natural Resources. And as I referred to that document and started reading it, one thing jumped out very quickly, which is on page 4, that basically sets up what's to follow, which is all the definitions about bogs and bayous and marshes throughout the state. The comment was made, actually it's on page 2, that numerous classification schemes exist within the state of Florida, but all or most of these are basically subjective and incorporate the observer's bias. So they basically set it up early on before you even get into the report that there is a fair amount of subjectivity in these in the report itself. But as you get into it, it ranks all the different areas, and there's a number of them, as under a G or an S rating. The G rating is a global rating, and the S rating is the state rating. So it looks at globally the larger outside of Florida, I guess, as a benchmark, and then it gets into the state of Florida, and it ranks what's going on within the state. Coastal dune.
Okay, please wrap up.
Okay, coastal dune lakes are rated as S1, and the interesting thing is that these descriptive terms are kind of all-encompassing. For example...
Now, Mr. Mustasio, just
finish. Well, okay.
Do
I
you have
guess
a
my
copy?
point is that the term critically impaired is a catch-all statement that could apply to for a number of reasons, not because necessarily that the lakes are seriously...
Mr. Mustasio, could you submit a copy of that for the record?
I have my copy. I can submit it.
Can you submit it later? I mean, can you get a copy to us?
I sure will.
I understand.
Well, I don't have a total report.
I didn't realize. I thought when you said impaired, it's like, but I've been led to believe that because critically impaired does not mean necessarily that they are in critical danger. It's that they're rare. And that's the term that's what's explained to me one day last week, whether it's right or wrong. That was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're saying globally imperiled doesn't necessarily mean
that they're in terrible shape and.
Okay.
Yeah.
William Fries.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is William Fries, F-R-E-E-Z-E, and I want to speak to you and strongly urge you to deny this request for any changes in this form. I had the privilege and honor of being the first chairman of the board of the Friends of 30A as well as the 30A Foundation. I also had the privilege of working with two of the sitting commissioners now, Commissioner Meadows, who was there when the designation was granted, and Commissioner Jones, whose obligation was to protect and preserve this coastal dune lakes. We're not talking about something that is unique to Walton County, unique to Florida, or unique to the United States. There is only 2 other places in the world that has this type of God-given natural treasures. Why do we have to change anything for property owners that should have known or did know what the regulations was when they bought the property? You know, this is something that God has given us to preserve as a national treasure. And, you know, it's for the world to see. It's just not ours. It's for everybody else. And I sincerely hope that the 2 ladies will live up to their past performance record and vote against it. And that means you only need 1 more, but I'd be terrifically happy, significantly happy, if we had a unanimous vote to deny this request. It just isn't something that should be done. It's not the right thing to do. Thank you very much.
Tom Patton.
Tom Patton, P-A-T-T-O-N. I have 2 things to put on record. In the form of letters. Good evening. Something that has not been discussed a lot, and I think is very valid to understanding the potential for, in my opinion, not creating any additional pollution, is that the county staff is now requiring a stormwater plan with any of these houses in the 300-foot zone. and they're requiring you to treat the stormwater off your house. Now, your driveway might produce some pollution, and if you have a lawn that's fertilized, it might create some pollution, but the house and the house footprint basically takes rainwater and puts it into a stormwater treatment system. So there's very, very little pollution, in my opinion, that results from an additional house that's built to today's standards. The second thing is we haven't factored in the fact that in the comprehensive plan is a 100-foot buffer. Now, granted, if you're less than 200 feet, there's a compromise to the 100-foot buffer. But it's very important that this natural buffer is also nature's way of filtering. So we're not, these houses are not loading up the lake with bad things. I mean, if somebody over-fertilizes their lawn and doesn't use best practices, that's unfortunate, and that could be a problem, and that's something we should probably address. But I really think the ordinance does a good job of addressing a lot of these things. I know it's not perfect yet. The second thing is I took some aerial photos that Edmund Alexander, who's a graphic artist here in the audience, created to go through and show you two things. One is basically the coastal dune lakes, the developable area is substantially built out at this time. I mean, the subdivisions are there. They're either new subdivisions since 1992, of which there are at least 6 that I could come up with that do have 100-foot setbacks. I don't know if they made their 25% rule in each time, but we've taken big steps with the recent development. We also have a phenomenal amount of state land, conservation land with the Topsail, with the 4 Mile Village Preserve, etc. So we have done a whole bunch, but we do have lots that desperately need help, and they need help now. There's a lot of people who are sitting on hold. Unfortunately, a lot of them don't get word about these hearings and don't come. Maybe it's fortunate for you folks, but we desperately need to go ahead and take a step forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mary Kanofsky?
I'm going to pass.
Mary Nielsen?
Pass.
David Milam?
It's David Milam, M-I-L-A-M. Commissioners, I'm here. Thank you for your time. I represent the Hickses, who have some property in Grayton Beach, and we're here to speak in favor of the current proposal that's been proposed by the Planning Department. I think a lot of time, effort, energy, consideration has gone into that process. I appreciated their candor in working with me to understand what was happening and why it was happening. It's our position that the existing version of the rule, what I call the 75% rule or the 25% rule, one or the other, is arbitrary and unreasonable. And I believe that it all but guarantees legal action by owners who own property, whether they have a structure on the lot or whether they have a vacant lot. I think this is compounded by the inconsistent and sporadic enforcement of what's been on the books for some time. If you drive around, I think you will see that, and it also provides us with an understanding as to why we are where we are in terms of the confusion on this issue. To illustrate this point, at the Planning Commission meeting, I guess about a month ago, one of the commissioners noted the question was, where did the 25% rule come from? And I've not heard anybody. We've requested documents to try to determine that. I haven't gotten any of those. But his answer was there was no basis for it. It was just a number. It was a number we plugged in. And I think that's the point, is that there has to be a rational basis for it. I heard a comment today that protection of the dune lakes is the ultimate goal of the county. I certainly understand that is a goal, but it is not the only goal. And I think we've got to take steps to try to make sure that there's a balance. The 25% rule on the Hicks's lot devalues that lot by 45%. From what is currently proposed with the 50%. We understand that there's considerations on both sides. I think that there's a lot of people here on both sides of the equation, a lot of good people. But at the end of the day, the 25% rule we believe is a taking on this property. We believe that the 50% rule is a compromise. I think that's the only way we're going to get anywhere. We've been working on this. I've been coming to meetings for, I guess, almost a year now, and it's time for us to make a decision. I own a lot on the lake. I was out there with my kids yesterday paddleboarding on Big Redfish Lake. I appreciate these lakes as well, and I think we all do. But there's got to be a balance that we strike in this equation, and I think all the hard work that the Planning Department has put into this, the hard work of the Planning Commission, and the consideration of all folks involved, I think we've come to this proposal. My clients are willing to live with the 50% at this point, and we encourage you to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Patricia Carlisle.
Patricia Carlisle, C-A-R-L-Y-L-E. I applaud the commissioners and the planning department for all the hard work they've done on this. Sometimes I hesitate to speak because I don't understand all the legal terms. But I'm speaking on two sides. One, I'm a real estate broker, and on the other side, I'm a diehard conservationist. I moved here from Washington, D.C. in 2001 and uprooted myself, my career, and my family to move here primarily because of the coastal dune lakes. And I'd protect them beyond anything because I think that that's why we're here. I think it's a international treasure that we should protect. And in that way, I speak from the heart. The second thing I want to say is that when we have someone from the Coastal Dune Lake Advisory Board only allowed to speak for 3 minutes, I think that does us all a disservice. These are people that are volunteering their time to do the research that's necessary to bring the most important information to everyone. And I think that they should be either allowed to have time conceded to them or be allowed to speak for longer than 3 minutes because they've spent so much time researching the issues that are so important to all of us. Specifically, as a real estate broker, in the past 6 months, I've been the one to try to educate my clients who are selling property. And one in particular was selling in a hardship situation. They've owned their lot for over 30 years in a platted subdivision of Blue Mountain Beach. They got ready to sell their property because of a health issue and discovered the 25% rule, which really put a devaluation on their property. Everyone who came to buy the property, I felt it was my responsibility to educate them as a real estate broker about the 25% rule, and each person backed away from purchasing this lot because they weren't sure if it was going to go to 50% or stay at 25%. And when we did, it's a quarter-acre lot, 28 feet above sea level, and 4 lots back from the beach. If I had a plat, I would be able to show you. It's 198 feet from a coastal dune lake, and yet they were going to be restricted to building on 25% of their land, a quarter-acre lot. So we did all the numbers. If they were to put a driveway in, they would only be able to build about a 2,000 square foot lot on a quarter of an acre. So there's a little bit of inconsistency here. I would say I would agree with a lot of what people say. We have to find a solution. I'm strongly in favor of protecting the coastal dune lakes, but this isn't a one-size-fits-all situation. And when you have a lot like that or a group of lots that are so far away from the coastal dune lakes but will be affected by this rule, we have to do something in balance.
Wrap up your comments.
Thank you.
Billy Bezette. Anita Page.
First, I just want to say before that I did submit some documents that weren't mentioned earlier, as myself having submitted some documents.
You need to go ahead and spell your last name for them.
P-A-G-E. I'm sorry. So Wayne, wherever you are. Anyway, I submitted some information to Wayne that I would like to be included in the record here. I did a full presentation, but I guess in 3 minutes I'll just hit one issue, and that's stormwater. Clearing, increasing the clearing to 50% is one thing, but increasing the potential impervious surface to 50% is pretty substantial change. And that is my concern, is I would like to still see an impervious surface limitation within the 50% clearing allowed. I think that would encourage people to do more pervious driveways, decks, and so forth in order to have a larger house. So I submitted a proposal to that to Wayne, which I don't know if he gave to the commissioners or not. But here's my other question about the stormwater. It's said that every lot now in the future will be responsible for their stormwater. So I guess I'm on a lot of record. So I guess if someone on a lot of record wants to add an addition, they're going to have to file a stormwater plan. Now, first of all, I think that there's going to be a problem with a lot of the lots being able to do the stormwater plan that is required in the current documents. First of all, they require grading. You know, there's so many other options to grading your lot in order to control stormwater, and I doubt very many people that have spent a lot of effort on landscaping and so forth want to go back after the fact and start grading their lot for stormwater when we have so many low impact options to stormwater control. And I put those in some information that I sent to Wayne that I hope you'll take a look at. I think we need to enhance the stormwater. But secondly, just looking at it on lot by lot, you must contain your stormwater doesn't account for the accumulative effect. And 30A is clearly a problem, no question about it. And the county needs to address its own issues. But also, I think we need to have a cumulative stormwater analysis and plan for each of the coastal dune lake drainage basins. And for example, if an individual is going to do stormwater, what is the stormwater treatment requirement? Is the 95% that would be required for a highly valuable, or is it the typical stormwater 85% that's used in a generic, that any developer would use in a generic upland? In other words, how much of the pollutants and nutrients are they going to be required to remove? What is the standard? Outstanding Florida waters have one standard, and there's okay. Let me just ask one more. My second question is on the tree. I mean, how much has to be retained? Is it the 1 inch minimum, the same as any upland development that's not on the dune lake, or are we going to require more, as suggested in a document put out by the FDP Stormwater Guide Manual, which I would like to have gotten into? But
thank you, Ms. Page. I'd like to put into the record your comments that you had referenced that you had sent to Wayne, which were passed along to the commissioners, and I will give you a copy, Madam Clerk, at the end of this meeting so that we can do that. Thank you very much.
Let me ask a question about the stormwater, guys, or whoever wants to answer this. On page 19, it's part of the code right now. It's part of the comp plan right now. And as y'all know, comp plan, this portion of the comp plan it's been enforced sometimes and sometimes, but for the most part, it has not been enforced. And so, number 2, it does say, in cases where this is not possible, referring to grading of the lots. A lot of people don't want to move dirt around. So if you don't do that, if it's not possible, it says you require other stormwater treatment methods between the developed area and the lake to hold and treat runoff. I'm assuming that our current 1 inch, 24-hour, 25-year storm would apply unless it's in a closed basin, and then it would be increased. Is that?
Yes, ma'am. I believe you're correct on that. That's something that we can clarify with Public Works, but I do believe that's the normal standard we carry out today.
Okay, and that brings me back to, some people have said, well, it doesn't include any treatment, but that is how stormwater is treated per our code right now. I mean, that's how all these subdivisions, that's how everybody has developed at this point. So I'm assuming that would be the same case here, unless it's in a 100-year a closed basin, meaning no outfall. then it would be, I think it's a 100-year storm they have to hold and treat. So this is actually as far as reality goes, this is actually going to be required of these lots now, whereas before it was not. We were doing nothing about stormwater on lots of record on coastal dune lakes.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.
I have one question. Wayne, am I on? Yeah. In her letter, she asked about, or she mentioned best management practices for lot owners. Do we have anything like that we use now?
I'll defer to Scott. Do you know of anything, Scott, that we use? No, and there's been a lot of questions that we've received regarding best management practices. Can we notify lot owners? And I think from the planning department side, I'm sure from environmental with Scott, we would be glad to give information out when someone comes in to permit a building or a structure on a dune lake in the protection zone. We'd be glad to include a packet with there, provide information at our office via the website, however, and have a copy of the best management practices and some of the issues with fertilizer and so forth like that. We'd be glad to pass that along and be a sort of a conduit for that public information to get out. We'd be glad to do that.
Great. I think that's a great idea.
But and two, this has been in the comp plan since when, 1996?
That's my understanding, yes, ma'am.
And there are a lot of people who care a lot about these coastal dune lakes. And until we discovered that this wasn't being enforced, nobody that was concerned about these coastal dune lakes has addressed this up until now. So I feel like we're all in this together.
Lloyd Blue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lloyd Blue, BLUE. I had a number of points that I wanted to cover, but first off, I just wanted to say I think the restriction on the amount of time that we're given the importance of this, y'all should revisit that. By your own figures, more than 3,000 homeowners affected. And the fact that it's the coastal dune lakes, I think that this is, if ever there's a subject that's worthy of as much time and as much discussion as is necessary to get it right, I think this is one of those issues. So I would urge y'all to, revisit that. And I do not think that a 3-minute limitation is a fair amount of time for a presentation on this issue. I'll just make just a couple of comments. One, I was there for the comp plan hearings, all of the comp plan hearings since they started. I've developed and own a lot of property on the coastal lakes. At least 3 county attorneys, and probably 4, the late George Miller, Gary Vorbeck, who is still here and still practice, the late David Hallman, they all interpreted this ordinance and its application consistent with what the county, how it applied it. At least 6 planning directors consistently followed that interpretation, and that interpretation was to apply the term new development or redevelopment to not apply to previously platted lots. And so we find ourselves today, with a complete reversal of 20 years worth of history on development projects that I did on the lakes in 2000, 2002, 2003, 2004, some of which required commission approval. The staff, whenever there was the depth available, applied the 100-foot setback, but did not apply the 75% rule. And I think that in the net effect of what this interpretation and the ordinance that you're doing is to take away the rights of people legal rights that existed based on their lots being platted and the almost 20 years of interpretation by the county. And I think adding the 50% doubles the developability for people who bought property with the full knowledge of what the restrictions were beginning in 1996. So I think, it's a double, whammy. I think people who shouldn't have based on being fully aware of what the restrictions were, to be increasing what they can do on the coastal lake and taking away legal rights that exist. And I do not believe that it is possible for this restriction on lots that were platted before to be legally enforced. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next name up here is unreadable, so when we get to the end, if you signed up and your name hasn't been called, I'll have you come up. It's just totally unreadable. Bill, looks like Bullard? You pass? Okay. Garner Chandler.
Good afternoon. My name is Garner Chandler, Chandler. First, I'd like to agree with Mr. Blue on his comment of the previous interpretations and the lots prior to 1996. Those properties were in existence, and people purchased those properties long before the original code was developed. Secondly, I would like to speak specifically to Section 4.02.04, which describes the existing properties that are already built on the lakes. As a realtor, I can cite 3 specific examples of where these have impacted commerce in Walton County. One is a home on Eastern Lake that was built in 1925. It's on a 1/4 acre lot. I guess that counts as a small lot of record. I don't really know. But I had someone who was ready to buy that house, Jiminy split, lickety, cricket, whatever way you want to say it. And when I told her about the uncertainty of being able to rebuild the home in case of fire, lightning, storm, whatever, she said no. And she right now is looking at buying a property in Port St. Joe instead of Walton County. That's one example. Another example is of a seller of a home that I have on another coastal dune lake. This is a 2/3 of an acre lot, but 1/3 of the home is within the 100 feet of the coastal dune lake barrier setback zone. Needless to say, this has terrified many purchasers of this home because they don't know if they would be able to rebuild that home. I do have it under contract. The person buying it, coincidentally, has a home on Eastern Lake that is also affected by this ordinance. And any buyer for her home is going to be asking the same questions. So I urge that at a minimum that we separate out the section to allow existing homes to remain and to be rebuilt in case of an unforeseen event. Thank you very much for your time.
Susan Palladini.
Good evening, everyone. Susan Palladini, Palladini, with the Coffee Nature Preserve. I'd like to enter something for the record. The Coastal Dune Lake movie. It is beautiful. If you haven't seen it, Ms. Commander, it's going to answer all your questions that you were bringing up earlier. And it was one of the quotes that I was going to talk about, talking about these community types, which the dune lakes are one of. Each are ranked on rarity and endangerment, so it will clarify a lot for you. I understand this is a tricky issue. I do think we need to slow it down. The Coffee Nature Preserve is managed by the Coffee Land Trust. We own Lake Fuller, and we don't think this is a one-size-fits-all. I do understand that people have issues, but I would like to ask that you slow this down a little and we do some more research on this. Thank you.
Charlie Reichman.
My name is Charlie Reichman, R-E-I-C-H-M-A-N. I've been a member of the Coastal Dune Lake Advisory Board for many years, and in our last meeting, our agreement was that this new event that could happen would be very dangerous and very bad for the coastal dune lakes. And that's really what we have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Lynn Naismith.
My name's Lynn Nesmith, Nesmith. I've lived about a block from Eastern Lake for 15 years, and I'm just here to ask you to really appreciate the importance of our coastal dune lakes. They are beautiful, they're unique, and they need to be protected. After listening to all the presentations today, I guess I just want to reaffirm that everyone seems to be in agreement that this is a very complex issue. Both sides have raised issues. I just ask you to carefully consider your decisions. Degrading the overall health of the lakes and our shorelines along these lakes for a few individuals, granted hardships and granted economic issues, is not in the good for the overall community. So please do not jump to a hasty decision and consider the long-term ramifications of changes to the comp plan. Thank you.
Okay, I have someone named Matt. I cannot read the last name.
My name is Matt Fuller, Fuller, and I'm one of the owners on the lot that's on the screen in Stallworth Preserve, and we bought the lot and we're very excited about being able to build a home there, some very nice homes in that subdivision, and recently found out about the 25% rule, and that subdivision was actually platted in '92. And so all the houses that are in there would not be able to be built with this 25% rule. So it basically makes our lot unbuildable. It would be for the 25% footprint. You really would not. You would be able like a 1,000, 1,200 square foot structure, and so it basically makes the lot of no value. So anyway, if you would please consider that, because we're put in quite a hardship in that situation, not really being able to do anything with the lot. Thank you.
Okay, there is a signature on here that we could not read earlier. Did someone sign up? Please come forward. Suzanne, that is your signature? I would welcome anyone in the audience to decipher that.
Just like doctors. Suzanne Harris, Harris. Very seldom do Lloyd and I ever agree on anything, but tonight I think we do. The first thing is, Bill, I really do think that it just irritates everybody out there when the room's not even standing room only and people are sitting, and we're going till 7 o'clock and it's only 5:30, and people only have 3 minutes to talk. 6:30. Well, I think you need to go a little longer and give the people that came really time, and especially most people were here in 2 minutes, but really prepared to talk. And I remember a BCC meeting.
You're using your time,
I understand. I remember a BCC meeting where they talked about appointing somebody to the Coastal Dune Lakes Committee, and it turned into a 30-minute discussion because you had made the statement you didn't know what the Dune Lakes Committee did. I don't live on a dune lake. I don't care. I'm here about. I think the public should have time to talk. And I think it is horrible if any of you lived on a lot that could not be rebuilt on after the storm, if it was 50% damaged or caught on fire or was hit by lightning and burned. I don't know how the county got in this mess, but y'all got into it, and you've got to fix that problem, and you need to fix it tonight. And if the rest of this has to go on and be heard at a different time with changes to the thing, that's fine. But you are in the bad word. You are in hurricane season. You are in storm season with lightning and storms. And nobody should have ever had to buy a house and find out years later if it's hit by lightning or if it's hit by a hurricane that they can't rebuild that house. That is your responsibility. It is this board's. You've inherited the problem, but it's your responsibility to fix it and fix it before this storm season.
Currently, though, Mark, isn't the current code notwithstanding where the lot is located or where the house is located. My understanding is the current code has a provision in it that says anything that's damaged by a storm more than 50% has a right to rebuild. And I don't know what the other to the existing lot. So that provision is already in the code, and we already stick by that. In fact, when the storms came and blew some of the coastal houses away, they were rebuilt. Nobody ever said, no, you can't rebuild. So that's already in the land development code that you can rebuild if your house is 50% or more destroyed.
If it is
correct?
if it's not an existing non-conforming use, that's where we run into the problem. If it's an existing non-conforming use,
okay,
then we have difficulty.
That's exactly right. And you have non-conforming uses and non-conforming structures.
Right.
A non-conforming structure could be a house that exists in the right land use category, but maybe in a setback. A non-conforming use would be a gas station in a residential land
gotcha.
use.
Okay.
And so the language is in there. If it's destroyed by more than 50%, it can't be rebuilt. Now, that language is pretty standard throughout. I would venture to guess nearly all the zoning ordinances in the United States have that provision in there of some sort, and it's usually 50% is the magic number.
Yeah.
In the cases I've seen during my career, a lot of those cases get resolved through a variance.
Yeah.
So.
Mr. Carpenter, you indicated you wanted to speak?
Yes, sir. There is a provision in the Land Development Code that speaks to those single-family homes that existed on the date of adoption of the comp plan, and those houses that existed on November 7, 1996 were declared conforming structures and could be
December
rebuilt
7th.
in their footprint.
December 7th, 1996.
Right. But it only applied to the built environment, single-family built
family.
environment at that moment in time.
That's correct.
Okay, so what you're saying is that anything that was built before December 7th, 1996, if it is destroyed or 50% more or what have you, it is automatically declared conforming.
Yes, ma'am, it was declared conforming by the BCC as
Okay.
of November 7, 1996.
Okay, November 7th. Okay. So they would not be, yeah.
He's correct. If they were built prior to that date, then they would.
So a house that was, that's my point. That's what I've always thought, is a house that is sitting in the 100-foot setback, it's been deemed conforming. It's been deemed conforming. That's correct. So if it...
Excuse me, sir. So,
wait, I'm trying to...
you come to the podium, and Commissioner Meadows has the floor.
Yeah. I'm trying to ask them. I'm trying to understand it myself, so that's why I'm kind of bumbling around. But my understanding is that that what you just said, Mac, that it would be conforming, and so if something happened to it, it would be able to be rebuilt in its footprint, no matter if it was 10 feet from the lake, 35 feet from the lake, or how many ever feet from the lake. Is that what we're saying?
I believe that would be correct.
Okay, so see, that makes all the difference in the world. Is if your house, if you don't meet this 100-foot setback, and your house is destroyed or such, you're conforming. You do not have to go back and conform. Am I saying this correctly? You do not have to go back and move it up 100 feet unless you just want to.
I think the key issue is in that footprint.
Unless you just want to.
So if you want to build if you want to add a deck or whatever, I think that would create some complications with that. But
well, we're talking about the footprint. Now, the expansion of that footprint is a whole nother thing.
And again, if that's for a house that was built prior to the adoption of the code,
96, which quite a few of these lots of record were, and quite a few of these that are for sale now, that are looking to sell or buy, are in that same category. Correct?
Correct. Quite frankly, I think that language is a little bit, in my mind, it's kind of clunky, so to speak. It's you have to kind of.
That is a relatively obscure part of the code, and I think it was offered up at the last minute as a compromise to get the code approved. However, the language that we're offering clarifies that and puts it in a much more high-profile location.
That was my understanding. That's why I keep hearing this, well, we can't rebuild, but I've always understood that, yes, you can rebuild Okay, I just wanted to get that straight. What is that citation again, Mac?
I'm sorry, I don't have that memorized.
Okay.
And I will have to go look for it.
Okay,
Because it's in an obscure location, as I
But you'll
recall.
send it to me.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
thanks.
All right, before we proceed with a follow-up, is there anyone in the audience who did not sign the sheet to speak but would like to do so now? Okay. Yes, ma'am, come on up.
My name is Jane Davis, and it's more a question than speaking. I was concerned when it came up and people were asking about the 25% impervious, and I don't know where it came from, but we have professionals here. Surely you know where it came from. I just on my phone just looked and found 5 different states: Minnesota, Vermont, New Hampshire, and some cities that had this as their standard. And some of them would allow 30% if there were some mitigating, if the property owner agreed to mitigate lakeside property. So it looks like it's pretty standard. This is not like pulled out of the air, I don't think. That's for your professionals to say, but I was really surprised that this was something that was treated as if it had just been arbitrary, because it looks like it's a standard for lakeside developments throughout the country.
Yes. Ma'am, did you have a question?
No, I just...
No, ma'am, over here. Do you have a question? Yes, sir. Okay, come forward. Restate your name and ask the question, please.
Cynthia Alexander, Alexander. I would like some clarification here from the Commission and the land planners. On May 13th of 2014, you changed the Land Development Code with the passage of an ordinance. We have now gone through 20 drafts to revise what was passed. Please don't shake your head at me. We've now gone through almost 20 drafts to revise that language, and that is a revised draft that's before you here tonight. I would like for someone from planning or the commission to show me in the May 13th, 2014 ordinance where lots of record can build back.
Well, and the reason I'm shaking my head is because we did not change any ordinances and have not changed any ordinance. That's the subject of these things. What we're talking about now has been in this comp plan and this land development code since 1996.
96 and 93, I think, was the first time it was in the land development code prior to the comp plan.
We have not changed anything. In fact, what happened was somewhere down the line, about a year ago, we had a situation out on a coastal dune lake. We began to look at it, and our attorney made the decision that yes, you can't have riprap, you can't put retaining walls, you can't. You have to do this and this. This applies. He said this applies to all lots of record. That's where this came from. So it's not a new ordinance. It's not anything. It is a legal matter. Whereas the county has to comply with our comp plan.
And Commissioner, one of the confusions, we did add a lot clearing provision, and I want to say it was in May of last year.
We did add, we went out to the lots, and I said, how did these get cleared without the county knowing it? Well, we don't have a lot clearing permit. We immediately put into place a lot clearing permit. So that's the response to that. Now, you might be talking about the various drafts that have gone through with this.
Ma'am, come to the podium if you've got a question.
On May 13th, this commission signed, May 13th of 2014, this commission right here, not previous commissions, signed the lot clearing ordinance. It alarmed all of us. We asked for an interpretation from Patrick Pilcher, the property tax advisor, and he got back to us. I have the letter. I can send it to you. I can also send the copy of the lot clearing ordinance, which you don't seem to know about. And he confirmed that this was a reinterpretation of the Planning Commission, that it did indeed say that lots of record that were 50% or more damaged would have to conform to being 100 feet back from the lake and only use 25% of what was left after that in order to rebuild. And most lots will not meet that criteria whatsoever. That is the law of the land this minute.
if we have, if God forbid anybody in here burns down or has some other kind of event, or we have a forest fire or a storm surge event in the whole community, we can't build back.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, I do. In fact, I was the one who asked for the lot clearing permit because things were being cleared on coastal dune lakes without our knowledge. So I'm very aware of that because I was the one who did it, who asked for it and got it passed. That lot clearing was solely lot clearing. I don't know what Patrick Pilcher was telling people. We weren't privy to all of that, but that's the only thing we did in that May 13th ordinance was if you were in 300 feet, you had to go down, pull a clearing permit so that we would know what was going on in these areas because we were getting neighbors calling us going, that lot next door has been completely cleared. How did that happen without y'all knowing it? So that was what happened in May 13th of 2014.
Ms. Page, do you have a question?
Well, I was just going to provide the thing with the law of I think there's some confusion.
Come up to the podium and you can provide those to the clerk, ma'am.
Provide a little more information
You can,
on this law of record.
if you'll give them to the clerk, we'd appreciate it.
Well, hang on a second. Can I say something about it?
We're not going to go comments. If you got a question, fine, and if you'd like to provide something, that's fine too.
Okay, what I will provide you after the meeting is the lot of record provision in the comprehensive plan and the lot of record provision here, and I think she has a point. The lot of record provision in the comprehensive plan simply says that you're entitled to build a single-family dwelling. It doesn't say you can build the same thing you had. So I think it is important that there be a lot of record provision for the dwellings.
Thank you.
That's
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioners, I know that from my standpoint, what I was originally briefed on this was going to be versus what we've heard tonight, there are a lot of different understandings, a lot of different interpretations. When Mr. Freeze was up here, I wanted to applaud him for his comments that, let's stay where we're at because I don't know that we're ready to go forward, but I'm going to listen to what the commissioners want to do and hear what you have to say. But many of these things that have been discussed tonight were not my understanding as being part of what we have here. And I certainly appreciate the fact that there are a number of points that need to be clarified, at least as I see it. But that being said, I will ask the commission, tell me your views and what you want to do.
I think we're discussing a number of issues, and some may not be necessarily related to the other. I think it's Mr. Valentino. I applaud his interpretation. If we want to start protecting the lakes, if we're protecting these lakes, we do need to do something about septic tanks. We need to, he talks about eliminating fertilizer. I do, prohibiting septic tanks within 300 zone, prohibiting gasoline and diesel engines on the lake. And we as the county need to take a hard look at County Road 30A and what it's and how it's built and the bridges that cross it. We have to take a look at that. So if we're looking at protecting the lakes, not only for now but in the future, and we do have to take a hard look at how do we protect them. And I think those of you who are privileged enough to own property along these lakes, I feel like you take that stewardship that you've been given, I hope, very seriously, and one of the reasons to make sure that you don't build within 25 feet of the lake is that those lakes rise. When that gulf out there rises, those lakes rise, and then you have homes that we get calls on saying they're about to flood. So there is a reason for making sure they're either up or back. I guess what I want to understand is that, why did we start all this in the first place?
I can tell you.
Is it to protect those people that cannot now build, that could build?
Well, I keep hearing a lot of different things, but let's be clear why this came down.
Thank you.
There have been varying interpretations of what applies and what doesn't apply through the years. And there were times when the 100-foot setback was applied strictly and the 25% clearing or 75% non-clearing was not applied. Wayne called me after when we were working on the clearing permit, and we realized that what had been and how it had been interpreted and applied in the past was just simply inconsistent. Our goal was, and maybe we overstepped it a little bit, but our goal was we wanted to get something in the comp plan that made sense, and then we wanted to move something out of the comp plan into the land development code that gave homeowners a little bit of flexibility in terms of the 100-foot and the buildable area. The 50% was a proposal. You certainly could change it. But that's all we were trying to accomplish. We weren't trying to do anything else to the code or change anything as it relates to lots of record or buildable. There's no doubt if you own a lot of record, you have a right to build a single-family home, and no one regulation in either the comp plan or the land development code can prevent you from building a single-family home. That's clear. That's the law. It's settled. But in the past, what was happening was, well, we'll make you move it back 75 feet. We're going to let you build on 50%. And that's not what the code says. It's not what the comprehensive plan says. So we were trying to give something or draft something that these folks could use and work with that made some sort of logical sense. That's really where we are.
Yeah, and I have a couple of questions. And one of those things was that when the Planning and Environmental Department began to apply the 25%, actually apply it, they kept running into issues where people came in and said, I can't even build a driveway. I can't build because 25% did not allow that to happen. And so there was discussion of, well, then maybe that needs to be increased to allow them to build something reasonable. That's where the 50% came from. My question to you, Mark, is we heard tonight that the previous 3 attorneys and the previous 6 planning department has interpreted it that these did not apply. None of these coastal dune lake policies applied to lots of record. Is it your contention that it does, and that how do we deal? This is where we're in a tight position, is because past interpretations.
Yes, to answer your question, Commissioner, yes, ma'am, because we have design review stuff that goes on to lots of record. I mean, we have applied the code since at least the last 2 years that I've been here. We've applied the code to lots of record. Again, and the code's pretty clear, you just can't use any part of the code to prevent someone from building a single-family home. And you're right, we were running into that 25% rule specifically. Yeah. Let me also say, one of the things we've discovered was we looked at a number of plats for lots of record, and many of them had setbacks within them. Well, we can't change that. We can't say in the code, forget those, because those are of record, and somebody buys a lot there, has a vested right to rely on that plat. And so we were, this change that we had drafted and proposed, it recognizes that, and I think that was important. Also, I agree with you, Commissioner, that I think there's some tweaks to the language. I think you're right, in legal nonconformity, we should take single-family residence out. It should be any structure, because there are a number of commercial and other structures in there. I also think your idea about granting the variance may only occur with a affirmative majority, supermajority vote of those members of the variance board who are present, so long as we have a quorum is well taken. But all this other stuff, frankly, I think it's just a decision you're going to have to make.
Well, and the other things is, when you change one thing, then okay. So where the questions came up about, well, what if I want to rebuild? I think that came up as a result of saying, well, let's move the 50% only into the land development code, giving people the opportunity, if they have a weird lot, to build, to work around it, their architect, their engineer, work around it, and it might come up to 51, 52, whatever, but they would be able to ask for a variance. That was the only thing that my understanding was. And then there is that less than 200-foot thing. So the question, I think, is not how we move forward, but what do we do about the existing rebuild policy. I think all over the county, because let's say that my house flew away and I built it years ago and I did not have any, I had wetlands, but there was no wetland policies then. So the wind blows my house away. It's not in a coastal dune lake thing. Am I able to, I have to comply with the latest wetland removal criteria, or do I go back to when I first built my house and the rules then? I think that's a huge issue, which deals with much more than just rebuilding within 100 feet.
Yes, ma'am, and that is an incredibly loaded question. It depends on so many different things.
It does, and there's various levels of regulations that can make, parking can make a commercial building non-conforming. There's a variety of things you can do. I also want to just make mention that we're talking about rebuilding. I want to make clear, there's no misconceptions that when you rebuild, you still have to meet the current building code and the current flood damage prevention ordinance and so forth. So elevations and those kind of things. Yes, that's right. Yes, ma'am.
Building code and all that.
So the rebuilding is allowed, but there's other codes you have to meet before you can proceed.
Well, if we already have in place, as Mac suggests, that all single family built before 1996 is actually conforming, it wouldn't be a non-conforming. They could rebuild back where their footprint is, or landward. Landward, if they so chose. They could, I imagine, expand with a variance. Go to the variance board and say, I want to expand my house, but I'm going to go above the 50%. Is that something they could do?
It would be. It would
the way
be
it's currently
possible.
written. Yes.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
would be
they
possible,
could-
but they would
they
have
could-
to meet.
okay.
I'm sorry. They would be possible. They would have to meet the, quite frankly, fairly substantial
Okay, right.
variance requirements that
Right.
we have.
So they could apply to expand. Is there any situation that would be a negative to them rebuilding within the coastal dune lake? They have a house there now.
If it was a house that was built prior to 96,
Yeah.
Not that runs to my head real quick.
Okay. Now, if it's built after 96, what happens?
Well, then they're stuck with us.
Okay.
Whatever we adopt.
Commissioner Chapman, any comment on that?
Yeah.
So I think we either have to grandfather everybody in, or exempt them, or vest them, or
Sounds like
whatever.
it.
Huh?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, and then go forward with, anything, any parcel or anything that's created after this date, then it has to comply with the new,
So it's
with this.
50%.
Prospective.
Because this is what happens when the county doesn't apply the land development code and the comprehensive plan, doesn't enforce it, and just kind of lets things kind of go. This is exactly it right here. The chickens have come home to roost, and it is years and years of that happening, and there's no easy answer.
So would you equate then everything that is there as of today, it would be classified then as conforming?
Well, I think that everything prior to 96 is already conforming.
Right,
The
but I mean,
question
there's been some changes since then, but
Right.
in order to accomplish, I think I understand what you're saying, in order to accomplish that, so that if you built your house, let's say in 97, but if we wanted to be consistent here forward, then everything that's there now, as it sits, is conforming.
Well, that would be one way that you could address the people between 96 and 2015.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a quick question of Mark?
Sure.
This is the first reading. Mark, would it be permissible for us to try to work on some of this language and fix that language for the second reading?
I thought this was a
I
second
thought
reading.
this was a transmittal, but there's no reason we could.
I thought we had the first one in Defuniac, remember?
I'm sorry.
But that doesn't mean
Right.
we could not do that and
Right.
come back with more.
I would feel more comfortable if we did continue this which would give them time to work on the correct wording, would give us time to, they're going to try to absorb.
But what are we directing them to do?
You know.
We've taken a lot of your comments down. I mean, if you want to clarify those comments, what wish of the board would be?
We've got a couple dozen different viewpoints on lots of things, but I think one of the points that Commissioner Meadows made is key to this, is at what point in time are we going to say, okay, we've got to recognize that we've let lots of things happen over the past couple of decades. Let's be standard from here on out, and if it requires making everything that's there conforming, then maybe that's how we have to word it. But I think that she's absolutely right that we've had things going this way, that way, and every which way. We got to stop that, be consistent with what we do, but at the same time, those people that own properties have to maintain their rights.
I think one of the things that we're looking at them changing, Commissioner, is on page 6 where we say build or build further landward. And B, and then you say the quorum, and item C, instead of saying 5 members, say quorum of those present. Those are 2 things right there. Did I hear you say you wanted to take out semi-pervious, or you want to, and D?
Well, I don't know, because I didn't quite understand what they were getting at. I know what they were getting at, but I'm not sure that it.
Well, would this be a 2-step process? Number one, let's address your concerns first. And say, should we have something that comes up and declares everything as conforming at this time? Then if that gets done, then to provide whatever kind of detail you want for guidance and ordinance as to what would go forward. I'm concerned that there are people out there that have made reliance upon when they bought their property, haven't done anything with it yet. People that are after the 1996 December 7th date that have gotten stuff. And they should have their property rights protected as well. So would it be a 2-step process? First to address your concerns?
You know, I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking out loud. You know, it might be. You know, I see 2 or 3 things going on. Before 1996, you know, can people rebuild? What can they rebuild? Do they have to move their house out of 100 feet? Question number 1. Question number 2 is, between 1996 and 2015, if you purchase a lot, or if you own a lot, or if you, you know, what are the requirements for that? And then going forward from where we are today. Those would be 3, I think, 3 things you would have to look at.
Are you saying purchased a lot or built a house?
You know, I don't know.
See, have you, just because you own a lot, does that mean the same thing as if you've already built your house? I can see between, you know, 1996 and 2015, if you built a house, then that we declare conforming because the house is already there. Right. But if you haven't built a house, and even though you've owned the lot, wouldn't the 50% rule apply to these people because they haven't built a house yet? And
that could
we're
be
increasing it from 25 to 50.
And that could be.
You know, we're increasing it.
That could be, yeah.
But that's part of your 3rd step, though, right?
Yeah, that would be part of the, you know, yeah.
Because we've got people out here like the lady in the black and white dress, the young woman that says they're wanting to build a house and now they're in limbo. So.
Right. And that way, that would give people a surety of, people would know exactly what category they're in, what they've got, what they, you know, if you want to sell your house, if you want to buy a house. The coastal dune lakes, I think, are going to be the coastal dune lake management program, and a lot of that is going to be hopefully funded by some restore money.
From your mouth to God's ears. I mean, you know. And do the 1996 rules apply to the 1997 to 2015? What rules apply in here?
I think those are our questions. I mean, I think those are the questions I think that have come out of this, unless there's something else I think those are the questions that have come out of this. And so if we can answer those questions and get it into the code where, you know, but I don't know the answer to those questions. I don't know.
Are we going to have a significant legal problem if we try to go for that standpoint?
I don't think so, but I would like an opportunity to do a little research and make sure. I don't think so.
And we really need to think, do we really want to add expansion? Do we, I mean, after that point, do we really want to allow people to build bigger than what they could originally. I mean, would that be detrimental to our lakes? That really is very serious. We need to think about that.
I think
And the other-
monster houses, I tend to agree with you, would be detrimental. I mean, I'm sorry, any huge structure. But then again, I think at some point, whether it's in an ordinance or, you know, we start saying, hey, you know, we start restricting things that will be detrimental to the lake. And, you know, one of the resources we have in this county that nobody's mentioned is I think we have a county extension agent that can help us with a lot of these questions. I mean, that's. You know.
Well, I sense we're trying to tell staff come back with a clearer cut path to address those 3 steps, although I think steps 1 and 2 are very close, but then the 3rd step that would come in, and at the same time, to come back with some answers to some of the questions that we've heard tonight that are part of it here, but we don't have a clear definition on. So, Commissioners, I'd like to see us continue this at, how much time are you going to need? Is the
Mark, a couple weeks at the least.
Either the April meeting here,
We're
or
kind of past
excuse me,
April.
the June or the July meeting down
Catch up
here?
Bill.
Probably, do you think July, will that give you enough time, Mark, for your
I would
research?
think second meeting in June, we should be ready to go.
Okay.
But
Okay,
knowing
that's
that,
in the north end.
Oh,
knowing that it's hurricane season and
Yeah,
assurance
true. Very true.
that people can build back, I want you to send me that too, Mac, for sure.
Commissioners, I would propose that we direct staff to come back at the first board meeting in July as a continuation of this hearing with the recommendations that deal with those 3 steps and with answers to a number of the questions that were posed tonight.
I almost think it's important enough. Why can't we do it the second meeting in June? I mean, she's right. We're in the middle of H season. I mean,
It's up into.
well,
If you need, you want to do it.
but if it's important enough, I mean, then it's just 20 minutes away, people.
we
It
can be
ain't
ready.
exactly like it's, you know.
We can be ready.
Which one do you want?
Second meeting in June, we can certainly be ready.
I think that's prudent. I think because people need to build houses, people need to know where they're, you know.
Could I say one more thing?
Yes, ma'am.
The best practices, please try to include some of that for the people that already have existing houses, and then, you know, like the fertilizer and things like that. I think people get so busy, they don't even think about what they're doing to the lakes. So I think best practices to add that to.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Staff, are you clear on?
If that's okay with Mark, I think we can make that happen.
Okay.
And I think we have the questions and the comments from the board that we can put together a response.
Okay, so we're going to continue this to
Second meeting in June.
second meeting in June at 9 o'clock or as soon thereafter as part of the board meeting at the second meeting in June.
And that would be
June 23rd.
23rd, yes, sir.
9 o'clock
Or soon thereafter.
Sometime
Okay.
thereafter.
We have passed the 7 o'clock time frame. We are going to, is it a recess? Is that what the technical term is?
Actually, you can adjourn it. We'll just.
All right, we're going to adjourn till then. Thank you.